A little bit about tonight's presenter. Abbey Hayward is the Water and Energy Conservation Coordinator for the Department of Public Utilities. She is tasked with education and outreach for customers interested in increasing efficiency and conserving resources. And she always has a lot of great information. So Abbey, thank you for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And I must say we couldn't have had a better moderator, Elizabeth Watts, talking about electrification tonight. Okay, I'll move on. Good evening and welcome to Electrification Planning. As Elizabeth said, I'm Abby. I am not a certified electrician. I know very little about electricity except promoting electrical conservation. So for those of you who love amps, watts, kilowatt hours, all of those number things, I appreciate you. But that's not my world, so I went very high level on those things. We're just talking about kind of the method to get into it, not the deep dive technicalities of doing it. So if you're here for that, sorry. There we go. Okay. I'm also not here to mandate change or convince you to leave your gas appliances in the dust, especially if they're new or you just really love them. I'm not here to do that. We're just here to talk about different pathways and considerations and tools that I've come across in different conferences and different groups that we stay abreast of to help you in your electrification journey, whatever that means to you. So, again. So this is a graphic that I received once I completed the Rewiring America's Electric Coach certification program. And this is kind of how they talk about how you should approach electrification in general. Commonly, electrification is thought from shifting from gas appliances to electric. That's like the basics of what electrification means. But it's also about improving the health and safety of your home, whether you're worried about having a gas appliance in your home. Maybe you have little hands or little paws that get into a potential open flame situation. Maybe you have people in your house who are kind of forgetful and might forget to turn stuff off. It's also about the comfort of your spaces, controlling the heat and the cold. Many of us don't have air conditioning, but more of us are going to need air conditioning. Especially with wildfire smoke coming in, it impacts a lot of people. So if you don't have air conditioning and you have no way to keep your windows open and have a healthy environment inside, that's a consideration. And also sounds, if you don't want to hear the outside sounds, or if you're like me and you really, really hate the sound of your furnace kicking on in the middle of the night because you're a light sleeper, oh my goodness, this might be the change for you. It's also about preparing to reduce our carbon impact. I know that a lot of our electricity is carbon-based right now, but that's shifting rapidly, and who knows what it's going to hold for us in the future. As well as preparing our community to be more resilient and also accommodating growth. So making sure that infrastructure is in place for electrification to allow those new community members to join us and the new businesses that are down the road. I already complained about my furnace, so we'll move on. Weatherization and electrification go hand in hand, and the simplest way to think about this is a leaky house doesn't care how efficient your heating and cooling system is. You can have the top of the line system, and if you have no attic insulation, you're still going to pay for all that hot air to go right up out your ceiling. So that's something to think about, whether you want to increase that attic or crawl space or wall insulation, or even just putting thicker window treatments on your single glazed pane windows. That can go a long way in reducing the demand on the systems that you are thinking of putting into place or converting. So, first step is to get an idea of what your current consumption and demand looks like. There's a couple ways you can do that. This is our utilities dashboard, and the little yellowy box that just highlighted is for the AMI meter, and the second one is going to be for your billing. I'm going to bring up both of these as slightly different tools, and depending on how you want to choose to use the information, from a kind of a simpler perspective to really kind of that deep dive into the numbers. So this is my utility bill account. Just to show you that this is what the dashboard looks like. And then down below, you'll see all the different services that pop up on your bill. So you can see that we're going to click on the boxes toward the right side where it says view consumption. So it brings up a very, very basic screen, and it's going to show you the last 2 years of monthly data based on your billing cycle. This first panel is for electricity usage, and you can just see it's going to list month and what your usage was. And then the second screen here, I changed energy sources. So now we're showing gas, just for simplicity's sake. If you scroll all the way down, you're going to see that really simple consumption chart. Here's your monthly bill, basic graphic numbers. There's no easy way to export this to Excel or whatever your graphing preferred method is. So you can just go through and type all those numbers in if you want to try to manipulate it yourself. But again, this is more for the basic. I just want to see where I'm at. What's it look like year to year? So the second one we're going to go into is the AMI portal, the Automated Meter Infrastructure Portal. And this portal will let you, for those of you who don't know, or if you're not enrolled, you can see your consumption for gas, water, and electric. And you're going to change it where it's kind of confusing because where it says customers, where you're going to flip between those three services. So this is the main dashboard that we're looking at, again, for my house for gas consumption. This dashboard lets you do a lot of things, but at the same time, you don't really have to do that much. So you can see the home, its dashboard, and then it's got usage details and meters and settings. And within all of those, we're only going to look at the usage details, but you can also set alerts. So if you're going above a certain amount of usage, if you're really worried about staying within the same consistent usage month to month, you can set that. You can also, less appropriate for gas, but for water, you could set alerts. So if you're going on vacation for a week and you want to set an alert in the middle of the summer because you're afraid your irrigation system might start leaking, that's another good use of this service. You could also set it for electricity as well. Again, maybe you forgot to turn something off when you left. So it's just not running and running and running. So this is one day. This was February 25th. This was a day nobody in my home was home. And one important notice for the AMI, the Automated Meter Infrastructure Portal, is it's not going to record anything until it hits 1 CCF. So you could be using your water heater, you could be using your stove here and there, and you're like, well, it doesn't look like I'm doing anything, right? It's not recording anything until it accumulates enough to peak it at 1 CCF for this. It's also the same thing with water, so it won't record anything till it hits at least 100 gallons. You might be using more, you could be using less, but it's not going to peak anything on this record until it hits 100 gallons. That's where it's different from billing, because obviously we're always seeing what you're using, but for the dashboards, those are the minimums that you need to be aware of. Yeah.
Hey, wait, somehow the screen sharing disappeared. Can you reshare that?
Yes.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. There we go. It says it's resharing. Let me go
Okay.
back and forth.
We've got the one, I think the sharing one is coming up with the with the side, like the next slide showing up.
Okay.
Which it didn't do this when we practiced.
It did not.
Sorry.
Nope, you're good. Okay. How's that
There we
work?
go. That looks great. Thank you.
All right. So those are just some important considerations for the dashboard, is that it is constantly using it, but because that's just the capabilities of the software that we chose, it's not going to record things as you might see them. So this is a day where everybody was home. This was Sunday. So you can see that obviously we were using things, probably the heater because it was a little bit colder on Sunday, and we were running a gas stove for our heat this winter to try something else out. So I didn't have to hear the furnace click on and off. It's been wonderful. But that's just to kind of show you what it is. And then if you click on those three little lines up in that right side, it'll let you export that data into Excel. So you can change, I want to see the last 12 months of data. I want to see the last week of data. So you have a little bit of flexibility of what you want to export, and you can export a lot of stuff, but on this user side, it's just a little bit clunkier in the amount of data you can see at one time. So we're going to switch over to electricity. Again, you can see everything you want to see real quick on this dashboard, set alerts if you want. And then this is the overall electricity usage for just one day. So I'm going to walk through just some of the trends that we can see here, and that's something you want to do. So once you go into your demand data, is what are you using when? What does this mean, right? It gives you a lot more information than the gas one. So this one is, I set my dishwasher to run in the middle of the night. I always set it about 12:30, 1 o'clock, because nothing else in my house is running. So those 3 bars are my dishwasher. This is breakfast, right around 7 o'clock. This is when I set my laundry machine to run. This is when I was home for pizza, or home for lunch. This is supper, when we made pizza in a little countertop convection oven thing. And this is when I turned on the heater in my kids' room. So I know what's happening during those spikes and what kind of time I was using them, So that's something you might want to consider doing, is getting into this AMI meter to really see what is it using. Over there on the left, you can see the kilowatt hour things. So a common question we get a lot is, why is my bill so high? We see this a lot. We field the question a lot. So we try to break down, is it a meter issue, or is it you just have to really come to terms with your consumption, is what ultimately it comes down to. I'm not saying it's never a meter issue, but understanding what you're actually using is a big thing for people to understand. So some things factoring into influencing your bill is weather. This last January was very cold compared to November and December, like 10 degrees a monthly average colder. So you're dealing with that. And depending on how well insulated your house is, it doesn't matter the size. The size of your house really doesn't matter in the long run if you have very poor insulation. So you could have a very large house that's really well insulated, or you could have a really small house that has none. And you're going to see the difference because all that heat is going where you don't want it, which is out. You also want to look for leaks, peaks, and wastes like we just did. Where are we peaking? Why are we peaking? Is somebody video gaming in the middle of the night who shouldn't be? Or maybe that's when they choose to do it. That's something to consider. And then this resource that's on the screen right now, Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory has a program called Standby Power where they really try to investigate what are your plugged-in doodads using when you're not using them. So this is a really, I found it pretty handy spreadsheet that they put together of a lot of really common items in a home. And again, it doesn't tell you brand. I always would go with the median. If you have something fancier, more complex, maybe stand on the more max end of that wattage there. But you can go through and around your house. Do I have 3 cell phone chargers just hanging out? Do I have a video game console that's on standby mode all the time? Do I have a computer? Do I have, XXX? And you can kind of get an idea and a sense of what's running in the background for your home. Unless it's not plugged in, then you don't have to count it. But if it's plugged in, it's going to be consuming something. You could also borrow a kilowatt power meter from the public library. If you're not convinced by this worksheet, borrow one of our meters and you can really see what it's costing you, because you can fix that to our utility rate. All right. The next step, you want to look at your current panel capacity. Again, this is my electric panel. It's one of the originals. I live in the eastern downtown area. So what you're going to want to do is, this is the label, the picture on the left, that's on the lid. So you open it up and I can see I can either go to 125 max or 100 amp max, depending on layout. This breaker right here is 100 amp for the main, so I know that I have a 100 amp panel. If you're not sure, you can always consult with an electrician to come into your house and really tell you this is what we're working with. And unless you have electrical skills, you'll want an electrician. We're going to get into permitting and all that inspection stuff later, but definitely either be a qualified person yourself or hire it out. This is not something where you can just unplug it, do some stuff, and plug it back in. So we figured out how big my panel is. Now let's talk about if you have any capacity. So this right here that just highlighted in blue is the sub panel in my kitchen. This one, the previous owners used to have an electric dryer. I don't have one, so I have a breaker open that I can do something with, which is exciting. It's a 50 amp breaker, so induction stove, do I do a heat pump system? Do I put a car charger there? I don't know, right? So I have some space available. Then I have a little tiny 15 amp panel, which trying to interpret the labels that are scrawled next to it, it looks like it might be for a central vacuum system that was once upon a time in the house. It's no longer there anymore. Kind of wish it was sometimes. But that's what we're guessing. So because the labeling was all over the place and we couldn't interpret all of them, we did do the turn it off, figure out what turns off, turn it back on, relabel it for everything. And let me tell you, it's a mess. There are lights in different rooms, and I'm sure you've done this in your own home. If you haven't, it's a good, fun scavenger hunt, but it can be tricky, especially in these older homes where things are kind of added onto or hodgepodge together over the years. So again, this is just up here. I'm not going to go into depths, but it was requested that I do include some information of what does this all translate to for people who don't understand. So that's there for you to read. the next step. What are you wanting to add or upgrade? I say upgrade because you might already have an electric stove, but new modern induction stoves can be all the way up to 60 amps. And if your current electric stove is only on a 40 amp, that's something to consider. Is now you have to deal with a bigger breaker as a possibility if that's something you weren't really prepared for. I also especially encourage you to think long term, especially with the strain on the trades right now. Do you want to hire one electrician or multiple for every project? Even if you have a guy that you go to, he or she might be busy and they aren't at your beck and call all the time. Technology is also changing very rapidly to support lower draws without sacrificing efficiency. And that's what this chart up here is showing. So it's showing you a lot of the heavy hitters in a home. What's going to use the most amount of electricity? It's cooking, it's heating, it's hot water heating, and then kind of the extra stuff. So there's some really cool things that are coming. I'm not saying they're all suitable right now for our climate or maybe for your needs. But you can see that, let's look at hot water heaters. So most hot water heaters, if I have a gas one and I'm going to electric, you would need a traditional larger plug, that 240 plug. But there are 120 volt versions coming out where all you do is just plug it into a normal wall outlet and you have hot water. So there are options to consider. I looked at a really cool induction stove the other week, and it has a battery built into it. So it's available to you if there's a power outage, because that's a common thing of people going, how am I going to cook if there's a power outage? Because I have a gas stove now. How am I going to cook? Well, have a prepared plan for cold food. But now there's an electric model that's coming out. It's very expensive. It's pretty looking, but it's rather pricey and not for like the common person who's looking for a stove to upgrade to or to change or modernize or whatever your needs are. But technology is changing very rapidly. So maybe you're keeping that in mind and you're like, oh, I'm going to keep tabs on this particular device or this particular thing that supports my little tiny utility closet in the middle of my home. The only thing I'm going to say about solar, I'm not going to go into it on here, but it's obviously a component of electrification for some people, is figure out how you're going to use it during the day. If you're producing it, how are you going to use it? Or figure out how you're going to store it so you can use it later. Because if you're producing it, you might as well use it. It's your energy. And then something that kind of came up in developing this talk is we are trying to figure out if there's interest in having another discussion on home energy management, software, techniques, behaviors. So if you do have a solar system or a battery system, or even how do I figure out when to run my dishwasher best when everybody else isn't running theirs, or when do I plug in my EV so I'm not putting strain on the grid, whatever that looks like in terms of energy management systems. We're tossing around the idea of having a discussion on that in the future of how do I do it for my home, or what should I look for, or what considerations. So now we're going to go over some calculators, and bear with me, this does involve a little bit of unsharing, resharing for those on Zoom. So the first one we're going to go through is a super simple, just gives you the basics, but it does do a really good job of stepping you through the steps. Like, I want an induction stove, or I want to convert from a gas to an electric stove. How do I do it? So it's going to go through those basic steps. So let me see if I can do this real quick. Share. This one. Can they see it on Zoom? Okay. So this is Rewiring America, and they have always had really, really great resources for electrification since yes. Oh. How did we do that last time? Hold on. I have to exit the presentation. Sorry, Zoom people. Okay, that's right. Am I still sharing on Zoom? Okay. So this is the electrification resource from Rewiring America, and they've always had really good resources, even from the start of rolling out the Inflation Reduction Act almost 3 years ago now, and putting it kind of straightforward. How do I do this from a layman's perspective? So this is their electrification planner that is on the screen right now. If you just go into the regular login for this, or the home screen, up where it says renters here at the top, it's going to have another tab that says homeowners. But I've already created an account, quote unquote, for the municipal building. So you didn't have to see where I lived. You can see the municipal building. So we're going to look at the municipal building, quote unquote, planner. But it's going to walk you through, why do you want to electrify? And it covers things from like, I'm worried about climate change, to I just want to modernize my home. I want to look at it from a comfort perspective. So it's going to approach it from a lot of different angles. So it's not just a sweeping, we're going to do this because it's good kind of thing. So in the planner, this is my electrification plan. And it says up here, why am I wanting to electrify? And then it's going to show a screenshot of where your home is. And then some of these very easy, do some pre-work, get a home energy audit, which we don't cover audits. We don't offer audits here, but we do offer thermal cameras, and you can always come talk to me about your usage if you're not sure what's going on. That's the best we can do for audits right now, unless you're certainly welcome to go out and find an auditor yourself. But we're trying to offer some workarounds until a energy audit service is confidently located here. Pre-wire your home to get it ready. So that means, we can click on that view project. Planning for all the things that you want to electrify. Is that putting in an EV charger? Is that putting in I want to put a stove plug in now, but I'm not ready to purchase the induction stove yet. It's kind of getting all your priorities in place right away. So we're going to just scroll through this real quick, and you can see all these different items it talks about up here. And if you go into my projects, it's going to do that for all of these items. So if you're only interested in water heating and you don't care about the rest of it, it's still going to show you all these same points that we'll scroll through real quickly. So this is just a general overview. Why are you going to do it? Who is this for? There's not too many impacts because you're just pre-wiring. Rebates and credits, anything that would offer. I just got a call from 350 New Mexico today, and they are working on trying to get the state rebate tied into this. Because it's not currently. Because Rewiring America just doesn't want to throw out anything, right? They kind of want to have a verified system, but they're working off of 50 states, plus or minus whoever has programs in place. So they're working on trying to get that up here, but we'll go into state rebates later. The upfront costs that they're going to talk about, Rewiring America has been trying really, really hard to have people give them what they've been paying for services. So this is across the nation what people have been submitting, plus estimates, right? So we know that an electric panel could vary widely here based on what you're upgrading, who's doing the work, what that timeline is for if you want a specific electrician, so on and so forth. So that's why it's going to vary so much for this thing. But it gives you a decent estimate of it could be a lot of money or it could not be a lot of money. And then I really like this part. It's going to walk you through that project guide of all the different steps to make sure you're not forgetting anything. Determine your panel size, which we just did. Figure out if you can electrify in your existing panel, so on and so forth. I don't believe the contractor network directory works here yet either, but that's something that's coming. You can also always just reach out to CDD, the Community Development Division, for a list of qualified contractors to work in our county as well, if you don't have an electrician. So, and then it's going to give you some more resources if you're not sure about electrification. Here's some pros and cons that they've come up with. More in-depth resources of how they relate to this particular topic. Let me go to induction cooking real quick while we're here. Just to show you something different that has... So this one, more details. It's got a positive health impact because it's removing that gas source from your home, which is many studies have shown is increasing in air pollution indoors. It's going to show you what the lifespan is of it and all these different doodads. And then this one is going to show you an energy bill impact. Again, this is something they've compiled from everything they've tried to get submitted and every study they can find. It is going to have a positive or an increase in your energy bill overall because you're paying less for gas, but you're paying more for electricity, right? because now you have another electrical device in your home. Climate impact. It's reducing it because you're removing that gas from your home and putting in something in with electricity. Rebates, upfront cost, project guide, and then it's just different articles you can reference pertaining to induction cooking. So the second calculator that I'm going to show you, if I can move this. There we go. This one is for all my data heads, those who love numbers, those who love R values and insulation thicknesses and number crunching. So this is the green upgrade calculator from RMI. So we're going to click on the home. And I'm going to do super high level with this. You can pick different types of homes, townhomes, single family, or mobile home. Obviously, super vague references of dates. We're going to do pre-1980 because a lot of our houses are older than that. And I'm going to pick 1,000 to 1,500 square feet because that's pretty common for here. So this is going to ask you, what are you interested in overall? Let's do weatherize, I want to install. And it's you can go into, I want to do these sub things. It's going to ask you a lot of information. I want to do an induction range. And then this is going to ask, what are you using right now? What are you using that you aren't? So any space heating, we don't have any space heating. So it's going to offer you some other insights into your home, even if you're not interested in it. It's just going to use basic parameters based on the New Mexico state stuff, natural gas, and let's do natural gas. So the optional steps is where you data people are really going to love it. So it's generating those defaults. Like I said, if you're not interested in this or you don't know what your value of your windows are, you can just do view results. And I'm going to click on that in a second. So it's going to ask you like stories, and you can show advanced inputs. And this is where all that information would go into play. So it's defaulting. But if you know these values, you can plug them in to see those really refined results. And again, this would be with whatever you were interested in doing or upgrading, or you can get as detailed as you want, even down to grid emissions, which you can consult your local utility for. Just going to continue. Again, more just you can go into what's the breakdown on your bill, how much is your bill per utility. I'll skip ahead to the results here soon. What do you think it's going to cost you to do if you have an estimate from anybody? So I'll skip to view results. So it's going to give you a cost impact and a climate impact. And if you don't put any of those any more detailed than the generic details it's going to default to, it could be better or worse depending on your specific improvements. But this is going to show you what your upfront cost is going to increase by. And again, it's assuming you're no longer paying for gas, but you're paying for electricity based on our local rates or whatever it defaulted to. But your annual cost is lowered by 88. So it's going to dive into a lot more of those details that people are asking about. And there's the climate impact of this decision that we had quickly upgraded. So again, this is just a calculator for people who are more interested in really diving into those numbers. All right, now I'm going to show you the watt diet calculator real quick while we have this open so I don't have to reshare, share, unshare, figure out what's going on. This next section that we're going to move into is what can I do on 100 amps? If I can only go up to 100 amps or I can't afford to go beyond that, what can I do and still electrify? Redwood Energy put together the watt diet. So it's how can I do it within 100 amps? So this is a pretty good resource that goes through how you understand what you want based on amps. You can thrive on a 100 amp panel. So they go through some examples, and then ultimately, I'm not going to open this again, but they have an Excel spreadsheet that, again, for data people, it'll default some numbers in for those who don't really want to know all the numbers but want to see this. But for people who really love specifics, you can get into, I have this machine, and it'll plug into, I want to get this machine, and you can put in what its needs are, and it'll show you kind of what kind of max panel you should be looking at. So that's in the resource handout. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint real quick so I don't talk myself into a hole. Okay. I will reshare in a second, Elizabeth. Okay. Technology. Okay. All right. So, can I stick with a 100 amp panel? This is important to know. It's not applicable in all situations. Some things you really need to consider is, do you still have knob and tube wiring? Is your wiring grounded like it needs to be? These are things I've come across or heard stories from in this community. Is one house wired one way and the other part of the house is wired a different way? Do you live in a multiplexed house that once upon a time had 100 for 4 units and now you're all down to 40 or whatever? Things to consider about that you just can't automatically either stay within 100 or go up to 100 without incurring significant costs. Other things within a 100 amp panel, most homes have less than 80 amps that they're using at any one time. So if you think about your own home, do you have every light on, every appliance on, your car's plugged in? Like, it's highly unlikely you're using everything at once, right? So that's where that 100 amp kind of gives you some flexibility of, okay, I'm not going to run, we'll just move into that. Managing loads. So you could have a sub panel like I have in my kitchen, circuit sharing. So these are interesting things that I have yet to hear anybody use, but I hear a lot about. This is something where I have my dryer and my stove plugged into the same circuit. Often I'm not running those two devices at the same time. And if I were to, I would flip a switch on the circuit that says I want to prioritize my cooking over my drying. And when I'm done cooking, it clicks off over to the dryer and it restarts. This is often also used between a dryer and an EV charger, or a range and a EV charger. So those big draws that you don't need to be using all the time will save you some panel space with circuit sharing. There's software like I talked about earlier with the energy management. Smart panels are essentially software built into a panel, and it's got an app and it clicks and doodads, and they're rather expensive upgrades. But if that's something you really want to do and take advantage of that energy management, maybe that's something for you if you have to upgrade a panel and your panel upgrade's already 5,000 or 6,000, what's another 1,000 at that point, depending on your situation. Like I mentioned also earlier, the new tech that's coming, those appliances that run at lower voltage. And then appliance multitaskers. We were talking before this started, you're looking at like those combo laundry units where I have one laundry machine, does it all. I love it. Another thing that I didn't think about is ranges are technically combo units because it's got the stove and the oven in one unit, whereas some people have them as separate units. Doing those kind of things where you're reducing the overall consumption that you need. Let's see. Okay. So this is the watt diet that I mentioned before. This is the example, one of the example homes that it talks about what kind of ampage you're looking at. There's their automatic circuit sharing. It's between the dryer and the hot water heater. So again, something that needs a lot of energy, but you're not often using them at the same time. And don't need to when it's circuit sharing. So cost. How do we do it? Where do we go from here? We know we want to electrify certain things. What's it going to cost me? As I mentioned, that Rewiring America will give you a very general cost. The next step would be to go out and find contractors to get estimates, or if it's something you can do it yourself, going out to the big box stores or the little mom and pop appliance shops and figuring out what the costs are for general things. And then you can base that on what you need to electrify from there. So the order of operations, this is just one example, but they kind of all fall under this general thing. You found out that you want to electrify through the county, or this would be like, what's the county's process? What do I do now? So the first step is to find an electrician. That's going to cost you some money. So think about how much that's going to cost in the cost scheme. You and your electrician will talk about what you want to do, make sure it's doable, what the extent of the project is. Are you going to be rewiring for multiple things or just one thing? Those are all things to consider in what that estimate would be for cost. Then you're going to contact Customer Care Center, and they'll get you to somebody within the electric distribution, and they're going to come out and make sure that your home can support what you want to do. They're going to look at the conductors and the transformers, making sure that do you have enough lineage to support it? Is the conductor going into your house based at 100 amp, 200 amp? What's that look like? I went through this process last year just to understand it for you. And I found out that I can go up to 150 without incurring significant cost. So that's something for me to consider is if I can only go up to here, what's my panel going to look like? Or am I just going to stick within the 100 amp and try the circuit sharing out? Either way, as you saw from my electric panel, it's going to need an upgrade probably because it's old. So once we've understood, here's what needs to be done to get your desired power into your house at that level. Any work that does need to be done, such as if they have to trench a new line for that new conduit into your house, installing any conductor upgrades, that would happen then. Just as an example, the county fee for upgrading to a 200 amp service is at least $1,400, depending on how far of a trench do they have to dig or the length to get it into your house. If you are curious as to, I don't want a 200 amp, I want a 400 amp, or I don't have to go as far, or I have to go farther. DPU does have a fee schedule, and that's at ladpu.com/rates. It's in that handout I gave you. People on Zoom, Elizabeth will be emailing you that handout. So you can kind of get an idea if you want to look at that before you're reaching out to an electrician even, is this even way out of my price range or is it doable? So after all that outside work is done, that's when the disconnect reconnect would be coordinated between your electrician, the New Mexico Construction Industries. I'm honestly not sure what CID stands for. They do all the permitting through the state. That's when the state inspector gets involved. And then the county line crews to make sure they can shut you off and turn you back on in the same day. It needs to be within, ideally, 9 to 4, because they don't want to have a home that doesn't have power. Obvious. And your electrician would be doing the scheduling with the state engineer or the state inspector. So permit needs. This is super high level. Obviously, your situation is going to be very specific. So any electrical work, you need to go through that New Mexico CID, anything electrical related. And then they will also do coordination. You'll do coordination with the Los Alamos County Electrical Distribution. That's so they can shut off your power and turn it back on so you're not getting zapped. Any plumbing work. So if you are installing a new hot water heater, for example, but you're moving the location of it, you're putting in new plumbing. It needs a permit through New Mexico State. Solar and EV chargers will be with the Los Alamos County Building Division and also the electrical distribution. They coordinate together again to make sure the power gets turned on and off for that work to be done appropriately. Any windows, doors, and skylights for your weatherization or roofing and insulation projects would be through the Building Division. Any HVAC, laundry, water heating, or cooking, I just referenced that would get a permit through New Mexico CID if you're running new electric or capping gas or putting in new plumbing lines. Again, that's just to make sure that it gets done safely and up to code. And so you're not dealing with an existing situation where part of the house is wired one way and part of the house is wired another way because it wasn't done to code, or maybe the code didn't exist. So that's the bulk of why we need permits. And then a fun fact Any work involving more than 1 square foot of drywalling. So if you're doing panel work on your own, because you can get certified as a homeowner through the state to do any electrical work up to a point, and also any plumbing work, it involves a test and pulling your own permits. But if you're upgrading your panel, or replacing it with a new one, I should say, and you're not upgrading it, your sub panel, let's go with a small one, you would be removing probably a lot more than 1 square foot of drywall. So per the building code, that's where the LAC building division permit would be coming in. So if you see that on any permitting information moving forward, that's what we're talking about. So the last thing that I'm going to talk about on real briefly is rebates and credits. So electrification is expensive. New Mexico State has rebates currently. They are income qualified, and the next slide I will be showing will be those income limits within the 80% area median income. But there's also tax credits available. As of right now, they're still available. And these QR codes, again, they're in your handout as well. You can dig into what qualifies for what. Certain items are excuse me, are available for rebates, but not for tax credits, and vice versa. We had a pretty extensive outreach on this a couple weeks ago, so I'm not going to go into depth too much about it. But this is that rebate income limit. The numbers up here are the persons in the family. We did this for our employees, so we reached out to a variety of counties because we know that county employees are coming from all over. That column of area median income, the rebate requirement is 80% below that. So that's what all of these numbers relate to based on housing size. So don't forget, we do have some hands-on. So if you are interested in getting rid of your electric or your gas stove, for example, but you're not sure if you should just go to an efficient electric stove, or maybe you should switch to induction, we do have induction units for you to try. You can test your pots and pans and feel your favorite recipe out and see how it cooks. It does cook differently. It cooks much faster. But I've also been told it cooks with the quality of gas with the safety of electric. So I get a lot of feedback from people. If you try it out, please give us some feedback for the program. We also have an induction popcorn popper now. So for all your parties, you can try out the popcorn popper. And then there's that thermal camera that we offer from the library as well for you to do a DIY energy audit. So that's all I have. I will take questions.
All right, thank you, Abby. And again, for those of you online, if you can put questions in the chat, and then for anyone in the room, you can ask questions and we will repeat them for those of you online.
Very challenging about there's so many different things, right? I was looking for some rule of thumb kind of thing. So my house, I think, is very inefficient in terms of the area. Under that assumption, is it like always best to fix that first, or it might also depend? So that also costs quite a bit, or could it be better to get a more efficient?
That's a good question. The question was, should I address air leaks and weatherization, or should I go for a more efficient heating system, for example? In my own personal experience, I would address the air leaks and the insulation first. Because like I said earlier, it doesn't matter how efficient your system is. If you don't have any attic insulation, or you have a cracked window, you're going to be losing very expensive hot air out of a potential leaking source, versus kind of insulating and making your home a little more less drafty or a little bit warmer before you're replacing the heating system. The alternative to also be aware of is if your heating system, like my furnace is like 18 years old, don't tell it, but it's old and it could fail anytime. So that might be something to consider. If your heating system is really old, maybe put that money into a heating system you want. If it is more expensive, let's say, then you're not left in the cold on a winter's night when you're trying to be like, but I was going to insulate first. So that's something to consider. Does that answer your question? Mm-hmm.
That's different than service given to the house. How do you find out what our service is for your home?
That's a good question. The question was, we talked about how to determine panel size, but what about how do we determine the service coming into your house? And that is best done through contacting that customer care and getting an electrical distribution person out there and being like, what is my existing service and what could I go up to? That's how I worded it, is what could I go up to without starting to get really expensive? Because you can pay for whatever you want. It might, if you want a large service, you might have to pay for a transformer upgrade. But for some people, that's what they really want, and that's what they're willing to pay for. So go ahead and call customer care to speak to an electrical distribution. Electrical production won't help you at all. The distribution guys will come out and check and see what you're currently at, and then what you're able to go up to. Welcome.
How does a electric water heater compare to a heat pump water?
They, in true heat pump fashion, they're more efficient. More and more, they look very similar. Haven't been promoting. The question was, how does an electric water heater compare to a heat pump water heater? Sorry, I have to rephrase it for Zoomies. Everything that I've seen for water heaters, we haven't been promoting them too much because I haven't been finding that heat pump water heaters are quite ready for this climate. The high altitude, the cold climate type versions, whereas traditional heat pumps for heating and cooling, there's the standard heat pump, and then there's the cold climate version. You want to make sure you have a cold climate version up here to get down to those lower temperatures. Same technology applies for heat pump water heaters. I think that technology, it's changing quite rapidly. Originally, heat pump water heaters needed more space to be able to draw from all that air. So they were really ideal for, carports or garages or basements. A lot of homes here don't have that. They don't have that space need. If I were to put a heat pump water heater in my home, it would be centrally located back by bedrooms. That's not where I want that air to be pulled from, just for my own comfort level. So that technology is changing. Another advantage to the heat pump water heater is that it can be just a 120 volt, just a regular plug, versus the electric water heater needs that beefier plug. That's what I've been finding so far. That it's changing so rapidly. By next year, maybe there could be a model that's really well suited for this climate. But that's just something to consider. If anybody out there has a heat pump water heater, please get in touch with me. Also, solar water heaters. Still looking for more people. Because that's another option that we haven't talked about that's less electric, but isn't gas, that just isn't done as much anymore. And we're trying to see if it's worth promoting, how they work. And same thing goes for heat pump water heaters. I haven't come across anybody who's had them yet. You're welcome. The question was, the person has a circuit sharing breaker, which is exciting. I haven't come across anybody. As far as I know how they work is that if you were to turn them both on, whatever one is set as the priority, because you're supposed to be able to set something as a priority, it'll click the other one off. So again, what I've understood and read, it shouldn't be a problem with both of them trying to compete for that power. That's what I'm understanding it as, yeah. Whichever one is set as the priority. If somebody, I'm assuming, but again, I haven't come across anybody who's done it. If it was installed correctly, it should shut off the other one, because that's the point of it, is that it manually clicks between which one it's using. Okay. Yeah, the circuit sharing should click off if you're just changing out your ranges and then keeping, you said the dryer? Yeah. Yeah, does anybody else have any experience with that in the room? Okay, that's my understanding is that it's designed to click between the two and not be able to have two on the same while they're both trying to pull from the same. Yeah. Good questions. The question is, if you already have a 200 amp line going to your house, is that good? Yes. There's a lot of, I was talking with our electrical distribution people last week, and they came across a couple homes that are at like 50 amp or 40 amp, and they can't go up without incurring significant costs. Yeah, that's a good problem to have. Yeah. And I should say that the utilities is doing its best to upgrade as much as we can, I was talking to our electrical distribution head the other week because I like keeping track of what's a transformer cost because when I meet with other communities, I'm part of these cohorts where we meet across the nation. What's a transformer going for right now? A three-phase transformer, it's $80,000. So when you're looking at that, it's expensive and we have to do it where we can do it best. And then you're also looking at competing with transformer stock with places like California that had entire towns wiped out or part of towns wiped out. So they are needing completely new infrastructure. Well, every other community that hasn't been impacted by wildfire very recently is trying to upgrade this infrastructure with that same stock of transformers as we have them, because it's not like they're being massively produced. That's why they're so expensive. So those are things to consider from the utility side is that we're trying and we will support your electrification as best we can, given the constraints of the system. Ideally, I mean, even if you chose to sell it back during sunny days, it's going to be real low rate anyway, because it's sunny, right? And nobody's really at home to use those things. That's why I like to try to set my laundry machine or my dishwasher. If I don't run it in the middle of the night, I'll run it at like 10 or 2 when I know people aren't home for lunch, to take advantage of lower electricity prices. If we were to do time of use, for example, solar, I don't want to touch on it too much because everybody's desires for solar are different. But if you're producing the energy, why not use the energy you're producing instead of it just going off and doing whatever it does then? The alternative is more and more solar packages that are going to be coming down the road will be like more microgrid type. So battery technology, that storage technology is coming quite quickly. I'm not saying it's any cheaper right now, but the capacity to store more during the day, EVs that are able to be charged and store it during the day if you don't need it at work or you're close enough to public transport or, everybody's situation is different. But use your electricity. It's yours. That's all I'm going to say on that. No, the question was, has the county switched over to time of use? And we have not, but there are a lot of communities who are. And that's just something that we keep a pulse on for like the cohorts that I'm in, is a lot of communities do. And how do we do that with supporting solar? And, if we do switch to that and other communities have switched to that, how does that look in terms of resources and better using what you're making for your own benefit?
All right. Well, we don't have any questions that came in online, but we had great questions here in the room. So I want to thank everyone again. If there are no further questions, thank everyone and thank Abby for the great information. I learned a lot and hope you did too. All right. And a quick reminder, if you can fill out that email survey that you will get. For those of you online, you will also get a link to the information that Abby was presenting here tonight. So thank you all for coming, and have a great rest of your evening.